Welcome to the art of creative learning.
Welcome back. Just to recap, what we've done so far is create our 360-degree image. We brought it into Storyline. We created our basic variable and hotspots within the 360-degree image in Storyline. The next step is for us to actually set up the timer. And this timer is going to be counting the time it takes them to find all the images. So we are going to start with creating some basic variables. Make sure that the variables that we create match in the name perfectly, because there is some JavaScript that we will be installing in a little bit, where if the variables don't match perfectly, the script will not work. One will be the minutes placeholder, so min_0, and this one is going to be a text, and we're going to set this to 0, and then we're going to add minutes, and this one will be a number. We're also going to set that to 0. And remember, if you haven't been to the tutorial website that's got our working files, it'll have all these videos, and it'll have the job aids, which we will need for the JavaScript later. You can find all of that in the description below. So the next one we will set up will be the seconds placeholder. And this one's going to be text. We're going to set it at 0. And we're going to add our seconds. This will be a number, and that will be 0. And the last one we're going to set up right now is timer final, which is also going to be a text, but this time we'll leave it blank. So just for a quick high-level overview, the minutes placeholder and seconds placeholder, when Storyline is counting, if it only has 0 to start off with or single digit to start off with, and it jumps to 2 digits, the text actually gets cut off. What we have to have is a placeholder that can go blank and go switch to 0 based on what the numbers of the seconds and the minutes is. So if you don't use the placeholders, when it switches to double digits from single digits, the text actually gets cut off on the edges and you can't fully see the numbers. So that's our solve, is to have the placeholders, but we'll get into that a little bit more later. Once we've got all of our variables there, we're going to hit OK. And now it's time to set some triggers. So let's go into the slide. And the first thing that we're going to do is create a new layer, and this is going to be our timer layer. So I'm just going to name it timer. In this layer, we're going to adjust the timeline to exactly 1 second. And then we're going to add a few triggers. The first trigger is we are going to adjust variable seconds, and we're going to do add 1 when the timeline ends on this layer. And then hit OK. We're going to add another trigger that is adjust variable minutes, and we're going to add 1 to minutes when the timeline ends on this layer, if we're going to add a condition to this one, if seconds equals 60. So when the seconds timer gets up to 60, then we will add 1 to the minutes because that's been a minute. So we're going to hit OK. And then we're going to add another trigger to adjust variable seconds to 0. Set seconds to the value of 0 when the timeline ends on this layer if seconds equals 60. So the moment it hits 60, then it's going to jump down to 0 again, start over. Make sure that you have this after the minutes. So then as soon as it hits 60, it increases the minutes and then starts over. If you do it the other way around, it will not add to the minutes because it's already changed to 0 before it hits the order of this trigger. So the order of triggers can be very important. So then the last trigger that we're going to add to this layer is to jump to 0 minutes, 0 seconds on this layer when the timeline ends on this layer. What that's going to do is once this layer is shown, even though it's empty, it's going to use the timeline as your timer. So it's going to hit 1 second. The moment it ends, it jumps back to the beginning. And it's just going to use that timeline as your timer to then add to the seconds and then eventually add to minutes, depending on how long they stay in this interaction. Now that we've added our triggers to this layer, we're going to return to the base layer and we're actually going to add the numbers into our timer. So let's go over to Insert, Text Box. Let's draw out where we want our number text. Now that we've got our box there, we're not going to type just yet. We're going to go to Insert, Reference, Minute Placeholder, insert minutes, then our colon, insert seconds placeholder, and then lastly, we're going to enter the seconds. And then we're going to center this, and you can stylize this however you'd like, but I'm just going to center it, make it a little bigger, and I'm going to turn it white. There we go. While we're on this base layer, we're going to add a few more triggers. So we're going to adjust variable, minute, this is our minute placeholder, to blank when the variable minute changes if the value of minutes, not the minutes placeholder, is greater than 9. So what's that saying is if the minutes become more than 9, so it becomes 10, then that placeholder for that 0 doesn't need to be there. So we're going to make it blank. Then we're going to add another trigger, adjust variable, minute placeholder, set it to 0 when the variable minutes change if minutes is less than 10. So when it goes from 2 digits down to a single digit and it's less than 10, then the placeholder needs to be there. Okay, so now we're going to add our seconds. So adjust variable, seconds placeholder, to blank when the variable seconds changes if seconds is greater than 9. So once this would turn to 10, it's 2 digits. We don't need the placeholder, so we're going to turn it blank, and now we need the opposite. So adjust variable seconds placeholder to 0. When the variable changes, seconds, if seconds is less than 10. So if it goes below 2 digits, it becomes 1 digit and the 0 needs to come back. We're going to add one more trigger before we test, and that is show layer timer. When the timeline starts, once the timer is visible, it's basically turning the timer on, and it'll continue to run through a second and going back to the start and counting. So let's go ahead and test that and make sure everything is working as according to plan. We're going to preview this slide. And we've got counter here. So I'm going to wait just a moment. I'll bring you back when we hit a minute to make sure that the minutes is working. Okay, so we've got about 5 seconds left here. We're going to make sure that the minute actually starts counting. There we go. And then the seconds started over. So as soon as it hit 60, it switched to add 1 minute on the timer and then started the seconds over again, which is exactly the behavior we want in our timer. The next triggers we want to set up are the triggers that'll actually stop the timer. And this is where the variables that we set up in 360-degree image come into play. We don't know what order they're going to click things in, but we are going to hide layer. So if we hide the timer layer, that means it'll stop and the timer will stop. And we're going to hide the timer layer when the variable changes, and we'll do the first variable, confidential papers. And we need to make sure that all 3 items are found before the timer stops. So we're going to say if confidential papers is true, if the flash drive is also true, as well as the open computer is also true. So if confidential papers is picked last and all 3 items are true, it will hide the timer layer. Now we need to copy this for the 2 other variables. You can build it from scratch again, but in this case, we're going to hit copy and paste, and we're just going to change the confidential papers to flash drive. So if the flash drive changes and then all 3 variables are true, it will hide the timer layer. And one more time for the last, open computer, so that also all 3 items are true when the open computer clicks. So it doesn't matter what order, it'll hide the timer. So let's go ahead and test that real quick. Our timer is going. The computer is open. We have the flash drive and confidential papers. And now you can see it is frozen at 8 seconds. That's how fast we were able to find all 3 items. Next, we're going to add the found items counter, so it will count as it finds the items. In order to do that, we need to add a variable. We're going to name this variable found items. And we're going to change this to a number and starting at 0. Next, we're going to insert our text box up here for the final found items. We're going to go back to insert. reference, found items. Same thing, stylize this as you wish. I am going to center it. I'm going to turn it white and make it a little bigger. I'm also going to lift it up a little bit. There we go. Okay, now we've added that variable in there, but now we need to add the triggers that tie to that variable. So we're going to adjust variable, found items. We're going to add the value of 1 to the found items when the variable changes for confidential papers. Because again, we can't use set here. We don't know what order they're going to find the items. So we needed to add 1 to the found items variable when it finds one. And we're going to go ahead and just add when confidential papers is true. Adjust variable found items, add the value of 1 when the variable changes. If the variable changes is the flash drive variable, and if the flash drive is true. Last one. Adjust variable found items, add 1 if the variable changes, open computer, and if open computer is true. All right, let's go ahead and give this a test. Timer is going. We've got 1 there. We're going to go in a different order this time. 2 and 3. And it doesn't matter if you go back and click, it will stop at 3. There we go. So in this case, they cannot continue until all 3 items are found. What we need is a continue layer. So we're going to add a layer, name it continue. We are going to just design one really quick. We're going to add a box here. And we're going to change the color. We're going to change it to purple. I'm going to add some text in here. Way to go. We found all the items. We are gonna change that to white. Way to go, you found all the items. And if you wanted to, you could even be like, amazing time, and insert timer final. Now timer final, because as we set this up and each number is individual, you wouldn't be able to pass this through to the timer final. And that's where the JavaScript comes in, so that it'll combine all of this information from the timer that we built and put it into one variable. Now you might ask, why would I do that? Well, you could put it on your slide as a congratulatory number. And you can also use this variable to pass through for a leaderboard or something of that sorts to track who was able to do it the fastest time. Gamify it a little bit more. So we won't go into the leaderboard. That's another episode. But for now, you would need to know how to do this timer final variable. We're going to go back down to the base layer and we're going to add a few more triggers. Show layer, continue, when variable changes, confidential papers, if confidential papers is true, flash drive is true, and open computer is true. All right, same thing. We're going to copy and paste. And we're going to change confidential papers to flash drive. Paste one more time. Change it to open computer. Now let's add in our JavaScript so that it'll combine all the information into the timer into a single variable. So we're going to add one more, and this will be on the continue layer. We're going to scroll down to execute JavaScript. Now, for anybody that doesn't speak JavaScript, that's okay. I don't either. The script that you're looking for is in the job aid on the tutorial website, which can be found in the description below. And even though I don't speak JavaScript very well, and for anybody who does, if I butcher this, I apologize. But this is how it makes sense in my mind. This first line is the JavaScript talking to the storyline player. So, hey player, we need this variable. And then JavaScript renames it. We need this variable. Go get that one. This is JavaScript renaming it. And it will pull these variables. And then this last line here is it's then telling the storyline player to set timer final variable with this information. So it's taking the placeholder, which will be blank depending on what the minutes is. Then it's taking the minutes, adding that, and then the colon that's in the parentheses, it will place that in there and then pull these other two variables in order to make one combination of the total. So we're going to hit OK. And we're going to say run this at when the timeline starts on this layer. All right, let's give it a test. Let's go up to preview. This slide. We have open computer, flash drive, and confidential papers. It took us 7 seconds, and it matches down here perfectly. So now this is ready to pass through to a leaderboard, or if you wanted to jazz up this slide a little bit more, or something along those lines. All right, guys, I hope you liked the tutorial. If you do, let me know, like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time.
The art of creative learning, your e-learning lifeline.